You've heard of werewolves, vampires, ghouls, and of course, zombies. But not everyone knows about Dogman, and to be specific, the Michigan Dogman, which is weird, because unlike other creatures of lore, the Dogman is one that has proof that such a creature does exist. The origin of the Dogman legend in Michigan can be traced back to the late 19th century. The first reported sighting of the Dogman was in 1887 in Wexford County, Michigan, by a couple of lumberjacks. According to their scary and vivid description, the monster was said to be 7 feet tall, and just like the griffin, the creature has the head of a dog, but with the body of a human. Its eyes are blue or green, and unlike most animal noises, when the Dogman howls, it sounds like a human, just screaming, and it stands like a human, standing straight on his hind legs. There are many reports from people who claim they have seen them in Michigan, mostly in the Northwest Lower Peninsula. According to legend, the Dogman shows up every 10 years, with new sightings happening in years ending in 7. I don't even know how that adds up, but that's the rule. Like I said earlier, Dogman sightings are more than just whispers in the trees. It's not like the werewolf theory. There have been multiple eyewitnesses with vivid descriptions of this strange creature. The sightings are so frequent and rampant that someone was able to find the Dogman and video it. What you just saw is proof that the Dogman exists. In the 1970s, Mike Agrusa, at that time, was a young boy when he is said to have taken a video of what looks like Dogman while on vacation in northern Michigan. Now, I get the video is blurry, but that's all we can see. The video is actually 5 minutes long, and the first part just shows the family having fun. It was just a mashup of different activities of this family, which was normal. Until this particular day, when Mike saw the creature and pointed the camera towards it. And of course, you can see him running for his life as the creature runs after him. I guess he was lucky to be alive. We don't just have one piece of video proof, we have 2. That's the first one, and this is another video/picture proof from another person.
And there's some tension in the air, some pressure. I had what's called a back trail camera on my shoulder, filming behind me, and it filmed all the time. And then when I would return home from the research, I would review it. And I was sitting in front of the TV with a laptop in my lap, just kind of scrolling through the footage. When I get to this point, and I go by, and I see some movement. I see a dark shape and some movement, and I thought, that's strange. So I back it up and start watching it more slowly. When I slowed it down and started going frame by frame, that's when I actually saw what was back there, and you could see the head movement. It was back, and it came forward, and it kind of pushed itself through the foliage a little bit, and that's when it hit me. Oh my gosh, what is this? At first I was hopeful it was a Sasquatch, but then when I slowed it down and blew it up, it was obviously not a Sasquatch. You could see a visible snout. A Sasquatch is a human hybrid type being that has a flat face just like we do. When this creature kind of leveled off and poked its snout through some foliage, you could visibly see the nostrils opening and closing.
That was from the legendary Scott Carpenter himself, a famous cryptid researcher with years of research and findings under his belt. And no, the images/proof doesn't end there. In 2022, Amarillo Zoo, Texas, was the talk of the town after it shared unusual CCTV footage of an odd figure walking around in the early hours of the morning. Sharing a snap of the werewolf-like creature, the zoo pinned on X at the time, the Amarillo Zoo captured a strange image outside the zoo in the dark and early morning hours of May 21st, around 1:25 a.m. The city posed a series of questions to its Twitter followers, and even on the news network, hoping someone could explain what was in that image. But no one was able to come up with an answer. In fact, we did an extensive video on this particular image, and we were lucky enough to have a witness account on it, and what he shared was so crazy and baffling that he couldn't sleep for months. The crazy thing about this creature is that the Dogman creature has been seen almost everywhere in the world, not just in America. The first sighting of the Dogman, as I said before, was in Wexford County in 1887 by a group of lumberjacks. Then, in 1917, a policeman who was walking found the tracks of a wagon that didn't have a driver in the sand. But near the roadside, the policeman found the corpse of a 4-horse team with their eyes wide open. The autopsy report showed that they died of fear. A man fishing in the Muskegon River in 1938 ran into a wild dog that stood on its hind legs and growled at him. You might say this is all decades ago, and you are right, but we also have recent reports of Dogman sightings. In 2007, a famous politician from Benzie County, Michigan, had a scary experience on his way home late one night. Because of the nature of his job, his brother-in-law told the story so that the witness could remain anonymous. The man was driving back from a friend's house on a long cinder road when he saw a pair of eyes reflecting the light from his high beams several hundred feet away. At first, he thought it might be a deer, but as he got closer, he realized it was much bigger than that. The eyes seemed to be standing about 6 or 7 feet off the ground. He slowed down to about 30 miles per hour, but the animal hadn't moved. At this point, he thought it was a very large dark wolf, but he noticed that the animal wasn't on all fours. Instead, it was standing on 2 legs and towering over the dead deer that was lying by the roadside. When the politician stopped his car, the creature was clearly visible in his headlights. It hadn't moved, and he was starting to think it might have been a big stuffed animal put there to scare people, only for it to suddenly run off into the nearby woods. Scared, but determined to prove what he had seen, the man got out of his car and looked at the side of the road where the creature had been standing. He saw a paw print in the soft mud and took a picture of it with his digital camera. The print is very large, resembling a dog, and is nearly 8 inches across, which is twice the size of a normal wolf print, and pressed much deeper into the mud, which means the animal must have been very heavy. He put a shotgun shell inside the print to show how big it really was. One print isn't much proof by itself, but it's easy to see why the politician didn't want to go any further into the woods after seeing the creature head in the same direction. When asked if the animal he saw might have been a bear, he strongly denied it. As a shooter himself, he knew exactly what bears look like up close, and that wasn't one. I could go on and on about multiple witness reports, but you get the picture. This creature was something else. His gigantic size of 8 to 10 feet tall was real and experienced by a lot of people. The crazy thing about the Dogman mystery is that before the 2000s, only a select few knew about this creature, and those were the people who encountered it and were lucky to be alive to tell the tale. But even at that, they didn't come out with their stories. I mean, how do you tell someone that a dog attacked you, but you saw it walk up to you? Sounds crazy. So people kept their mouths shut. It wasn't until 1987 when a local DJ, Steve Cook, wrote a harmless song about a dog-like creature that the Dogman legend and stories blew up. The song is actually cool, and I'll definitely play it for you at the end of this video. Prior to this song, the world didn't know much of the Dogman lore. Even the DJ himself didn't know that there was a creature like the Dogman. He just thought he was creating a song with scary themes for Halloween, and that was it. Only for him to get dozens upon dozens of phone calls the next day after he released the song, with the callers telling him that they knew and also saw the creature he was singing about. Cook was adamant they were mistaken. He made the song from scratch, including the creature. There was no way they could have seen an imaginary creature concocted from his head. I mean, sure, if the song was about alien abductions or ghosts, you could say it's possible, but how could they tell him they saw a creature he made up a month ago? And for an April Fool's joke nonetheless. But when hundreds and thousands of people start to call to say otherwise, Cook starts to get nervous. The more Cook investigated, the more it looked like this made-up creature was real. We now know Dogman is real. We've established that fact. But what exactly are they? Some theories believe they are spiritual. In fact, an elder from the Ho-Chunk Native American group believes these are spirit beings from another world that take on human form while they are here. Another theory held by the Native American tribe is that this could be a skinwalker, which is basically a human who can transform into any animal, But Dogman is just a tad different from skinwalkers. It is believed that dogmen are shape-shifting skinwalkers who get stuck between their human and animal forms. And if you do a quick Google search of samples of skinwalkers, you most likely come to see plenty of images where the top is usually animal-like and the torso is human-like. This is one image. Again, we did an extensive video on it, and I don't want to go into it to avoid being repetitive, but you should definitely check it out. But basically, if we are to follow this route, it starts to add up, especially considering the fact that the howl sounds human-like, which could be so because it's an actual human. And I know there are a lot of critics out there, for good enough reason of course, but one thing I can't stop thinking about is that the Dogman has been staring at us for centuries, since the archaic time of great ancient civilizations. These civilizations were the very foundation of what we've achieved so far as a human race, and while we are busy saying such creatures don't exist, these civilizations were drawing images and writing about them as a way of accepting them and living side by side with these creatures. The one that came to my mind was that of the Egyptian deity Anubis. Anubis was an ancient Egyptian god of funerary practices and care of the dead. What does he look like? A human with the head of a canine. Anubis was the most important lord of the dead during the early dynastic and the Old Kingdom periods. Why would the Egyptians have a reverend image of a dogman, and not only that, but to worship the creature? Then, in the 5th century BC, the Greek doctor Caesius wrote that there were men in India with dog heads. He was a Greek doctor who lived at the court of Achaemenid, King Artaxerxes II Neman, in Persia, and wrote several books about Persia and India. Megasthenes, a Greek traveler, documented that he met with these creatures in the same India. Yes, creatures, as in S, as in plural, meaning he met with a small thriving community of dogmen. According to him, they talked to each other by barking. They lived as hunters and wore animal skins. Herodotus, the father of history, also talks about men with dog heads. He notes that ancient Libyans claimed the creatures lived in their lands. Marco Polo even talks about the dogman. His travels talked about a small society of dogmen, but unlike the rest, who recorded normal human-like behavior, Marco Polo told a different story of the dogmen being cruel and barbaric. I could go on, but it was well documented, either as a joke or as a real experience, that there were creatures with the head of a dog and the body of a human, either living as a hidden society far away from civilization or as hunters of prey. What gets me is that this was recorded by different people with different cultures at different timelines, and even though there might be little differences here and there, the majority of the descriptions were accurate with each other. The ones that behaved like animals were hunting and killing anything in their path to eat. And to corroborate that story, people have found the bodies of different animals in the woods or on their property with no blood on them, like the animals were killed somewhere else and dragged to a new site. At first, when I was researching this topic, my focus was to really find out more about the Michigan Dogman in, well, Michigan. But the more I kept digging, the more I kept seeing multiple witness reports. For Michigan, it felt like anybody with a large piece of land had encountered a dogman. And then, I started seeing that this was almost like a regular occurrence for a lot of people. Some were traumatized and never recovered. Some were lucky to be alive to tell the stories. And some didn't get a hostile threat at all, just like what Scott Carpenter shared. And some we will never know, because they could have been eaten. Now, here comes the part most of you don't like, the critics section. I know most of you might not like it, but my job here is to shine lights on all areas. As usual, there isn't much real proof to back up the Dogman of Michigan tale, even though there are a lot of creepy details and personal reports. And to make it worse, the first video we watched turned out to be a prank. The name of the film is the Gable film, and when it was released to the public, it went viral because of how authentic it looked. You could feel the fear and curiosity of Mike just by watching the video clip, but it turns out it was a fake. Since the viral video was released, Mike has admitted it was a hoax. But surprisingly, that hasn't convinced dedicated Dogman believers, because they believed he might have been coerced to lie that it was a fake. One thing I didn't mention is that there are several reports of the government having extensive knowledge of these creatures' existence, and they work day and night to ensure reports that are gaining traction and sounding believable are being shut down immediately. So they threaten the original witness with either death or making life financially unbearable for them unless they come out and say it was a lie, just like what happened with the discoveries of the Grand Canyon. In that story and scenario, they denied ever coming in contact with the same archaeologist they sponsored for an excavation, as well as destroyed every piece of evidence they had of them working with the archaeologist. That was something the government did regularly, and people thought maybe Mike was being threatened to lie. But even if the Gable film was fake, Scott Carpenter's footage isn't. At least, no one has come out to call him a fraud, and Scott stood by his word till his death. What about the tales told by the great men of old? Well, it turns out fanfiction has been in existence for a long time. Keishus, who first wrote about the Dogman, is not really known for accurate reporting, but was widely known for being a great storyteller. If he was born in our era, he would give Clint Eastwood or Neil Blomkamp a run for their money. In his story, there were also dragons, satyrs, and men who were 18 feet tall in his account. Another notion being spread about by critics is that what if what people were saying they saw were just jumbled up, confusing memories? To begin with, people easily forget things and mistake things for others all the time, and it's much worse when they get very scared. Stay with me for a moment. Imagine this scenario. A door opens and a police officer is suddenly staring at the wrong end of a gun. In a split second, his brain becomes hyper-focused on that gun. It is very likely that he will not recall any of the details that were irrelevant to his immediate survival, like did the shooter have a beard or the color of the shooter's hair. The officer's response is not due to bad training, his brain is just responding to a life-threatening situation the way it should. The officer might not be able to remember many important details. He might remember some things wrong. At the same time, he will remember very accurately certain details, which are usually the things that the brain was focused on, and might remember them forever. This is just natural. The part of your brain that handles executive functions, such as thinking logically and controlling your urges, is known as the prefrontal cortex. Your prefrontal cortex is working right now as you watch this video, and it's probably telling you to hit the subscribe button and give us a like. That's what it does. It usually doesn't let other thoughts or things going on around you distract you. But when there is a lot of stress, fear, or terror involved, the prefrontal cortex is impaired, sometimes even effectively shut down by a surge of stress chemicals. Most of us have probably been in an emergency situation where we needed to think clearly, and just when we needed our brains to work at their best, they slowed down and stopped responding. When the executive center of our brains shuts down, we have less control over what we pay attention to, less ability to make sense of what we are experiencing, and less ability to remember things in a structured way. Which brings us to the next thing critics say, which is it could either be a well-fed bear or a malnourished bear. Bears can stand on their hind legs and probably walk, and the well-fed bear size actually matches some of the descriptions gotten from the reports. In some descriptions, the witnesses are certain it's not a bear, because bears are full of fur, and what they saw wasn't, and they are right, but what they could have seen was a sick bear. This is a bear. This is also another bear. I could go on, and you could find more images of bears with mange on Google, but you get my point. So it's possible that this could be what people saw at night. Speaking from a personal experience, before I got into researching mysteries and doing videos about them, I never knew a bear could look like this. If I saw something like this in my backyard or at night, I would never remain the same because again, I had no idea bears suffered from this condition or could even look like this. Mange is a skin disease caused by different types of mites that affect wild animals. It is becoming more common in American black bears, which can cause severe loss of hair and skin damage that can lead to secondary infections and death from hypothermia. And I just have to wonder if my hypothetical experience was the same for a lot of people. Now, I'm not dismissing anyone's experience. I'm not saying I know it all or calling anyone crazy, but it's better to have all the information presented to you to make sure what you say you saw is actually what you say you saw. Also, once again, it doesn't help matters that there are a lot of fake and made-up encounters. This makes it harder to believe actual witnesses because all people will keep thinking about is the lies told, just like with the Gable film. I will say this though, and it's one of my favorite quotes from Boondocks. The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence. Just because we don't have enough concrete proof doesn't mean everything brought forward is a lie. Where there's smoke, there is sure to be something that started the fire.
Summer morning in early June is when the legend began. At a nameless logging camp in Wexford County where the Manistee River ran. 11 lumberjacks near the Garland Swamp found an animal they thought was a dog. In a playful mood, they chased it around till it ran inside a hollow log. A logger named Johnson grabbed him a stick, poked around inside. Then the thing let out an unearthly scream and came out and stood upright. None of those men ever said very much about whatever happened then. They just packed up their belongings and left that night, but were never heard from again. It was 10 years later in 97 when a farmer near Buckley was found. Slumped over his plow, his heart had stopped. There were dog tracks all around. 7 years past the turn of the century, they say a crazy old widow had a dream of dogs that circled her house at night. They walked like men and screamed. In 1917, a sheriff who was out walking found a driverless wagon and tracks in the dust like wolves had been stalking. Near the roadside, a 4-horse team lay dead with their eyes open wide. When the vet finished up his examination, he said it looked like they died of fright. In 37, a schooner captain said several crew members had reported a pack of wild dogs roaming Bowers Harbor. His story was never recorded.